Welcome to the Self-Publishing School podcast. This is the podcast to listen to if you're an aspiring writer or an author who wants to be more successful. On this show, you'll learn how to write and launch a book successfully, all from the top authors and people just like you who are doing it at the highest level. I'm your host, Chandler Bolt, the founder of Self-Publishing School, the author of the book called Published, and the CEO of selfpublishing.com. For free training on how to publish a book that sells 10,000 copies, go to selfpublishing.com/free training. Hey everybody, Chandler Bolt here, and joining me today is Daniel Decker. Daniel helps authors rapidly build their platform, launch best-selling books, and create sustainable sources of revenue from speaking and product creation. Now, over the last 13 years, Daniel has launched dozens of New York Times and Wall Street Journal best-selling books. He's helped multi-million-dollar speaking careers and worked with authors who have sold millions of copies. Some of Daniel's clients include actually speakers here as well. Michael Hyatt, Jon Gordon, Ryan Blair, Jeff Goins, Dale Partridge, Mark Sandborg, and Lisa Gibbons. And we were talking about this before the interview, Daniel and I were, of just, he's been kind of a behind the scenes guy. And the quote he used, which I love, is, "Hey, you might not have heard of me, but you've definitely heard of all my books that I've launched," because they've just been mega successes. So I'm excited to dive into that on this interview, and we'll really get into just the nuts and the bolts on the marketing end from these. We're talking big time platforms, big times book launches, New York Times bestsellers. Like, these are big launches, and I want to get into how he did that. But then also on the tail end, we'll talk about some of the speaking and some of the stuff that's kind of piggybacked off of that. But Daniel, welcome.
Chandler, I am excited to be here with you, buddy. Thank you.
No problem, man. I'm excited to get into this. I want to start by going back a little bit. I always like to go back to the start of this. And I know we were talking before this, you're promoting from music festivals, you're like all kinds of stuff. So it sounds like you're a marketing guy through and through, which obviously I love. That's the stuff I geek out on. But how did you get started on the book side of things? Like, what was that first project that you did there, and how did that get started?
Yeah, I mean, it's 14 years ago or so, I had an ad agency. And again, yeah, I'm a marketing guy through and through. I love it. It's nothing more exciting than being able to build and promote and get people involved in something. But about 14 years ago, I had an ad agency, and a friend of mine, Jon Gordon, at the time, he opened up Moe's Southwest Grill, one of the first Moe's franchisees he was, and brought it here to Florida where I am. And one day, Jon and I are, kicking it, and he's like, man, I really want to write a book, but I just don't know what to do. I don't know how to market it. And I said, I'll help. I had no idea what I was doing. And he had a big time agent that helped him get published. And we just went into it with not knowing what to do, and we crushed it. I mean, we were killing it, and we were doing things that everybody said we shouldn't. And it was really because said we couldn't, but it was really because we didn't know any better. And I loved it. Just started working with him, and then it kind of snowballed from client to client after that.
I love Moe's, by the way.
Do you?
Being a southeastern guy, welcome to Moe's, the free chips and salsa. Like, there was always a Moe's versus Chipotle.
Oh yeah,
it's always a debate. But what were some of the things that people said you couldn't do that you did with that first book launch?
Well, I mean, for Jon, he was like a lot of people out there, he got turned down, I think 27 times when he did his first book proposal out there. So people were writing him off as someone who wasn't going to make it. He was just another guy with an idea. And we just stayed aggressive and stayed consistent with it, and got him a good book deal. And then we were doing Amazon bestseller campaigns before they were Amazon bestseller campaigns. So we started first with him back then, building his email newsletter list. And that was a big thing, because that wasn't as popular back then. And we consistently, every Monday for the last 14 years, have published his weekly newsletter on Mondays, and grown his email list to now, I think we're at 180,000, something like that. So he's got big numbers where, whenever a book comes out now, he drops it and almost instantly a bestseller. That was really the big thing. And doing a lot of speaking, getting him out anywhere he could be, doing free gigs, whatever it took, we did it.
Wow. And so is him a first-time author, and is you a first-time book promoter who was just like, hey, I'm in. I'm along for the ride. Like, how did you guys do that? Like, what were some of the nuts and bolts and mechanics of that marketing early on to get that book traction?
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely a learning curve. There was just a lot of things that we were trying. There was stuff where John was eager and willing, and with Moe's, it kind of helped fund a little bit of what we were doing. So we would have him when the book came out. We did a multi-city tour where he was in his car driving to city, showing up to do meetups. We had no idea who was going to show. We were outreaching to media. I mean, literally me on the phone. Hey, channel whatever and such, this guy who you have no idea who he is coming. Do you want to have him on your morning show? And we were successful. We just came at it with a hook. We always thought about what's in it for the reader or for the person who might come to see him. We were less about, hey, look at us. We were trying to add value, and it just worked.
And what was, because I love that. And I think that's a great lesson there of like coming in it as what's in it for them, not just what's in it for John. What were some of those hooks as you were approaching these media stations as he was doing the tour and all that?
Yeah, well, so one of his first book was called The Energy Addict. So it was really about physical and mental tips to help you be on top of your game. So that was a little easier, but then he always got lumped into the fitness guy, and he really wasn't that, even though his book talked about, some personal fitness stuff. It had a lot to do with mental fitness and being on top of your game overall. And one of the things that we kind of got relatively soon out of the box was we had him on I think it was a 4-week or 4-session Today Show segment. And that kind of came about by us just coming up with some pitch ideas. I think I can't remember at the time, it was like how to start your day with a cup of energy. And we built off like 9 tips to get your day, that you can do in less than 10 minutes, that kind of thing. And we pitched that around a lot to local media in different cities and got some good traction with it and said, hey, let's take it national. What the heck? Let's try it. And it worked. But that was, it's a different day.
What was the process from taking it from regionally to nationally? And like, how did you even get in the door and get into that?
Me personally, I'm into relationship capital. Always looking at how can I, Chandler, it doesn't matter if I know you or not. If I'm dealing with you, I want to add value to you. So I'm looking at, like we talked before the show, I'm not a creeper, but I looked at your Facebook page and other stuff to see what's up. What are you doing? What are things you like? Because I don't want to just do something to someone to say, hey, promote me, give it all, about me. I want it to be, what can I give in return? Same thing goes for media or for whatever that you're trying to get platform wise. So with media, we quickly figured out producers are busy. They're trying to, knock out all these different shows. So if I could come to them with a nice, neatly packaged idea and that was already researched, already had citations and whatnot, the footnotes so they could know it was all legit, graphics, all of that, maybe it would help them. And it did. And many of them were thankful because we were basically pitching them an already contained segment. All they had to do was say yes. And anything that's kind of, quick tip oriented, get your day started, they loved it.
Cool. So it was just coming up with that and then cold pitching it to them, or like, are you
smiling and dialing?
Really? Just
no joke. Yep.
No
joke. Awesome. I mean, I literally, back then we were buying, and this wasn't just for the Today Show, but we were buying media lists so that I could go into a city, say Atlanta, and just have me a spreadsheet with all the media in town. And I'm literally just picking up the phone. Hey, Eric, producer of Good Morning Atlanta, blah, blah, blah. And that's really what it was. It was a numbers game, and it was getting to the right person. But it was just really hustle.
Was it hard to get on the Today Show?
That one segment, actually not really. I mean, that kind of worked out. I mean, it's much harder. I think we kind of struck gold a little bit with the right timing and the right pitch and maybe the right approach. I don't know. But that one was, pretty easy. After that, yeah, it's been a lot harder. I mean, he's been on multiple times, but it's, the pitches are different now because he's not talking about energy. Got it.
And you were talking about,
and I'm not the guy hustling, making the phone calls, quite as much on the media side anymore.
So it's probably not getting as good of results, right?
It's a good lesson for people. I think Chandler too, who are watching this and maybe are, in that self-publishing mode, you definitely need to have a team, but don't take away, getting out there and hustling yourself too. There's a lot to be said for that. And people, especially if they're on a budget, like with Jon, we didn't have money. I mean, we had just enough where he could pay for his lifestyle and a little bit to me. And then, most everything we got was because we had no other choice. Failure wasn't an option. We were going to succeed one way or the other. And if it meant we had to be on the phone hearing no 50 times before we got one yes, it's all good.
Got it. I love that hustle and that sweat equity. You made a comment a little bit earlier about, well, that was the old days, I think is what you said. How do you think that's changed since then? And how would someone approach this, and how would what they get on the other end of the phone be different?
Yeah. I mean, with regard to media specifically, the news cycle has changed, from 14 years ago. It's much harder. They have much fewer segments that aren't hard hitting news, more lifestyle pieces. They have fewer lifestyle pieces. So it's a little hard just because the inventory isn't as available as it was then. But just in general, I mean, a lot of the principles still apply of how to achieve the success. It's just a different approach to doing it.
Got it. Now, what was your angle like with this book for both Jon and for you? Because for him, I'm guessing it was an authority piece or something like, but for you, like, why get into book stuff?
Well, and that's a good question. And that kind of can go, it helps for those who are watching to define what it is you want to be and what you want to accomplish from your book or from whatever you're doing, because there are different paths. Like you have a different path of what you're trying to accomplish when you come out with a book than somebody else does who, like for Jon at the time, he just wanted to speak. I mean, the guy's a speaker. He's not necessarily one who wants to, create funnels and do, different launches, product launches, but he's doing multi-million dollars a year now in speaking. The book for him was a way to articulate his ideas. He cared more about getting his ideas out there. And it being that authority piece, but really for him, it's a labor of sharing the ideas and then getting out to as many people as possible.
Now, what about for you? What made you interested in helping with the book?
At the time, I mean, it was our relationship that with him, because he was a friend, and I love the book and the ideas. Jon's all about, I mean, him specifically, and most any author that I work with, I get pitched by authors all the time, and I run a small shop. I don't, I'm not a big agency type of deal. I'm real selective with the clients that I work with. And it has to be something that I gravitate towards, something that I can really ingest. I'm not going to take a book on just because, I mean, I've had people throw a lot of money at me to take a book on and launch it. And I've said no if it wasn't one that I really liked. And with Jon, he was one, I mean, it's all about positive energy, positive mental framing. So all that. So for me, work is mission. So if I can do something that is going to help better the world and I can make money and feed my family at the same time, it's a win-win. Absolutely.
Now, once you got that first book under your belt, let's talk about the transition. Like, that must have just been the little taste, right, at the beginning of this string of books. Talk about how you went from that first one on to the next one.
Yeah, it kind of it's once you do good work, it talks for you. Thankfully, in 14 years, I've never marketed myself. That's why I'm the behind the scenes guy. Our website is like a one page, really has nothing on it. And it's really just because I haven't needed to. I mean, we've got enough business that comes our way by referral. So that's really how it started. I try to, for me, I treat people like I want to be treated. I do work, I over deliver as much as possible. So when a client takes me on and, it's X, I'm going to deliver XX. It's just how I roll. So with Jon, it kind of got to be that, when we had success with him, other authors took notice, publishers took notice. All of a sudden, the phone started ringing and other projects came in. And for Jon and I, we just had the type of relationship where it worked, where I was doing things for him and I still do. But it wasn't needed to be a full-time deal after we got past his launch.
Got it. And I want to dive in a little bit to this next book launch. But I want to step back real quick for one more question on the first book. Of all those things you did on the marketing end for that first book, what would you say moved the most copies? Was it getting on the Today Show? Was it sending them out on the speaking tour? Was it something else? Like, what was it that really got some traction for that book?
Back then, it was a combination of a lot of things because we didn't have metrics like we do today. We didn't have the ability to measure things as precisely. But I would say, I mean, there was one thing that definitely stuck out is that, the Today Show back then, media moved books. Nowadays, not so much. But it moved a ton of copies, and especially when you had a 4-week segment that was recurring. So that did a lot. There's a online, well, he's not just online, but a guy named Dr. Weil, and we ran a ad in his newsletter, his email newsletter, because he had a huge list, and that like killed it. We sold a ton of books off of that thing. So that was what was like, oh, hey, wait, we can spend money and, make a return off of this. So those were the two.
So you said, what was the name of the new segment?
Or the segment was, I think it was A Cup of Energy or Start Your Day Off with Positive Energy. I forget exactly what it was, the Today Show segment. Yeah.
What was the last one you said? You said Dr. Weil?
Oh, Dr. Weil. That was a email newsletter that he's a nutritionist out of California, but he had a huge email list that we ran a banner ad. I mean, banner ads don't really work as well today, but they did then. Cool. So it was like, I don't know, it was like $3,000 or something. And we reached 200,000 followers that he had back then. And it just crushed it. It grew Jon's email. We at the time, 14 years ago, we ran it into a landing page and drove book sales and email opt-ins. And I think we got, I don't know, like if I remember right, 10 or 12,000 email opt-ins like within 48 hours.
Wow. That's awesome. Now let's talk about this. What was the next book project? You talked about Jon didn't need you as much, and then moving on. What was the next project?
Yeah, I mean, gosh, I don't know what the next one was off of that. I mean, it kind of took on several books after. There was a book on attitude from a lady named Barbara Kaufman in Atlanta, and it seems now like, you look back and you're like, wow, 14 years ago, but it's like a blur, man. I mean, it really is. It's like, and for me, the jumping, to the books that are now, and where things are, it's just the marketplace is so different, and things are just so different than they were then.
Yeah. And I want to dig in on that and here in just a little bit, some more of the differences. We talked about that a little bit on the front end. But you fast forward to, you were talking about, books with a bunch of other people, and like Mike Hyatt, Jeff Coynes, Dale Partridge, a bunch of people like that. Like, we can dive into specific books if you want to, or we can just say, start going through some lessons, like overall marketing lessons that you've learned from launching these books. Like, which way you want to go with it?
It's probably going to be, of more value to people. Just go through some lessons, and I'll pepper in a story or two along the way. One thing that's might be interesting is a lot of people. Mike Hyatt's got a huge platform, and a lot of people admire him and who he is and what he's done. And I have a lot of people that always ask me, "How'd you get in so tight with him? You don't live in Nashville." And that might be an interesting part, and then we can jump into some lessons. But Mike's a good example too of giving, but being a giver, because I met Mike just like anybody else through his blog, started commenting on his stuff, building a relationship. So I was at least visible to him. And then we met up at a conference, and I came to Mike and said, look, I've got an idea. I think I can add value to your platform and help you to do some stuff. And he's like, and I outlined it specifically, and he's like, sure, let's try it. I proved to him that, my ideas were good, and I proved to him that I was interested in helping him, not just using his platform to help me. And that, developed a good relationship with us. And then when it was time for him to launch his book, which was, I don't know, a couple of years later, I was the guy he called. So there you go. Got it.
What was that original idea that you pitched to him?
I think with him back then, it was something with Facebook. I want to say that it was like putting the Facebook widget on his blog homepage, and then it was, just, I'm a big believer in leverage. I think a lot of people don't leverage what they have. I don't know how many times I go to somebody's website and I opt in on their email list, and then it's like, the generic AWeber form, or the generic whatever, and there's no like people. Those are like prime candidates right there. You can leverage that, make them to a special landing page, and ask them to share with a friend or comment or tweet or whatever. Yeah. And the conversion's huge on that. But with Mike, it was just some of those little tweaks, and I don't remember exactly which ones, but I know it had something to do with social media and leveraging some of what he already had.
Got it. So you proved yourself first, and then he came knocking when
Yeah.
when it was time to launch the book.
Yeah. And that's just, you know, for people from a general marketing perspective, be a giver. I mean, that's a big lesson is so many people are out to, especially when in relationship marketing, and I don't even want to say it like that because it makes it sound transactional, but if people, you know, who are looking at Chandler and saying, man, you're killing it, you know, you've got a huge platform, maybe one day Chandler will be my buddy and help me promote my thing. Going to Chandler and asking Chandler to promote your thing when you have no relationship, you've built no equity, you have no value, you know, is wrong. And that's the way you get, you know, dismissed.
Yeah. And I completely agree with that. Like that's one of the ways I've made some of the best relationships with people of influence. It's just like just giving. But it is always funny when you get approached by people who just don't get that. It's like you just read their email and laugh.
Yeah.
and then delete it.
Yeah, exactly. And then if anything else comes through from them ever again, delete. It doesn't matter because you're not even like you're done. Yeah,
exactly.
No, that's a big thing.
What was the I'm guessing, was this Platform University or was this a different book for Michael?
No, it was his platform book. With Michael in particular, I came on with him. Gosh, I think Platform was in 2012, something like that. And then I launched his book Platform with him. We took it New York Times bestseller. Then I stayed on and helped him launch his Get Published course. And that did really well. That was really Mike's first big product launch. And gosh, I think we did like 200 grand on Black Friday, which, you know, at the time for what he was doing was gigantic.
Yeah.
Now, you know, and Platform University, Stu McLaren, who co-founded Wishlist, actually came on to help with the membership because I wasn't as familiar with the membership sites. So he helped with that. I was still involved with a lot of the behind the scenes stuff with it. And then, you know, it's just launched like gangbusters. It's crazy.
Yeah. So was that the first book that you helped out with that reached New York Times bestseller?
No. Gosh, I don't even know when the first book was. I think one of the first books that I got in New York Times. I mean, Jon Gordon's, what's funny, and this goes back to defining who you want to be and what you want to do with why you're becoming an author. Like, there's different paths for different reasons. Jon Gordon has sold almost 2 million copies of his books. He's never hit the New York Times bestseller list. Doesn't care. Doesn't want to. Doesn't matter. If he does, yippee. If he doesn't, so what? He's more interested in how many units are moving. And almost every single one of his books, we're at number 7 now, I think, sells more annually than it did the prior year. No, I think there's only one book that's had a decline. So,
wow.
But then in retrospect, there's other people who launch and their sole purpose is authority to get New York Times. So they'll come out of the box, you know, with 10,000 units, hit New York Times, and then their book never sells again. So there's just different directions and different paths. But I think my first New York Times book was Stan Slapp, who's a consultant out in California. And gosh, I don't even know when that was, but he had a book that was called Bury My Heart in Conference Room B. It was a crazy, weird title. But Stan's like the, I don't know. I mean, he's crazy. He's nuts, but he's a genius consultant, business guy. But his book was pretty crazy.
So how do you approach these book launches between someone like Jon who says, hey, I just want to move more units and have end over end improvement from year to year? How do you approach that versus someone who says, hey, I just want a New York Times bestseller? Like, what are the differences? And
that's it's a blessing and a curse from what I do, because we work with authors directly, we work with publishers directly, we work with whoever. I take every client as not, I mean, I don't cookie cut anything. I mean, there's some general, you know, things that we can do, but I look at it, what's the goal? You know, where does the author want to go? What do they want to do? And then we map out the plan to get there based on, you know, what they want to do, what their budget is, all that kind of stuff. And so, I mean, really, it's all about how you choose to condense the campaign. Because for New York Times, or any list, it's a concentrated number of sales within a 1 week window, a Saturday to Saturday or a Sunday to Saturday, is basically the sales week window that New York Times is looking at. And they're looking at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, independent retailers that they're sampling from of what that spread is. And when it's not a New York Times campaign, where they really don't care about it, sometimes we'll still try to condense that unit, but really it's more of a long tail strategy of how do we use this book to continue to build? How do we try to come out with ideas that are going to be sustainable and not just shooting it all into 1 week?
Got it. And let's dive into some of those short tail strategies.
Yep.
And then we'll wrap it back and I'll ask you some more about the long tail stuff. Short tail strategies. Okay. I want to hit, Daniel, I want to hit the New York Times bestseller. Like, what are some of those things that we would do short tail to kind of stack all that? Let's go over some marketing things there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and I don't know, what you teach on self-publishing from the perspective of hitting the Times, because there's things are changing, or hitting the New York Times, things are changing. And traditionally someone who's self-published, it's hard to hit the New York Times because you have to get distribution into the stores. There's plenty of ways to do it. It's just harder. But the strategy of hitting the list is still the same. Right now, as we're recording this video and everything, is kind of consistent with pre-sales are very important. Making sure that you've got at least a month, 2 month back from pub date pre-sale campaign, because all the retailers are looking at that. They're looking at to see, is this legit? Is this somebody, internet guru coming out of the woodwork and just, hammering it in one day? That's a big part of it. And it's making sure that your sales are distributed equally, or not equally, distributed amongst retailers. So you're not driving everything into one retailer. That just looks suspicious and gives it a bad name. That's kind of the initial stuff with trying to go after New York Times.
So do you sway your marketing much? Like, if we were talking about like 100% of efforts, what percent of that focus would be towards pre-sales versus what percent of that focus would be during launch week?
There would be probably a 50-50, because everything leading up to from pre-sale standpoint is going to count your week of launch, or from the list standpoint. So all your efforts pre and all your efforts week of all condense into the same week reporting wise. It's week 2, week 3, week 4 that gets into the different strategies of where there's because someone a lot of times will hire me and they don't care about week 2 and week 3. So all my efforts are pre and week of. There's others like a Jon Gordon who's like, I want a 6-month campaign. I want to keep it going. So we come up with a different strategy of, instead of having 87 podcasts in 1 week, we're going to stretch them out. Instead of having every newsletter drop or email list drop, on Pub Week, we're going to stretch it out and we're going to get real strategic. I've got a campaign right now that we're working on that I can't say who, but the Jeff Walker style of launch, where it is get a book for free, pay $6 for shipping, and then those books are routed into retail from the back end. We're looking at that type of thing. Instead of doing it on the front end, we're going to do it on the back end. We're going to, he's going to use all his speaking to drive pre-sales leading them into Pub Week. And then week 2, we're going to come out with a free book offer to help continue to drive it ongoing. Interesting.
And why not do that during launch? Why wait till week 2?
Partially right is you have to change things up. So the New York Times, and here's part of the biggest headache with New York Times best-selling books. The New York Times is a subjective list in a manner of speaking. So you could sell 12,000 units this week. I could sell 7. You don't hit the list. I do. Why? Because I don't know. They chose not to. No, there's some reasons, like if you didn't have the proper distribution, if you didn't have if you had no independent retailers reporting on your sales, that kind of stuff. But it's not really just based on volume. There's a lot of subjective decisions that go into the list. So that's a big point that differentiates a lot of these campaigns. And the Times seems to be looking at these campaigns on the front end to see who's doing these Jeff Walker style launches now. They've caught on, so if they see that someone is, I don't want to say gaming the system, but is running special promotions that's real visible, they seem to be knocking that right now. So that's why for this particular book, we're going to, after we get past the New York Times window from launch week, then we're going to switch into it.
Hey, Chandler Bolt here. I hope you're loving this episode so far. It's time to go from inspiration to implementation. All right, so if you've learned something, we want to help you implement what you've learned with your book. So what I want you to do right now is go to selfpublishing.com/schedule, book a publishing consultation with one of the experts on my team. We'll talk about your goals for your book, your dreams, your challenges, your next steps, and we'll start putting together a plan. All right, so go to selfpublishing.com/schedule, book a call with the team. Let's see how we can help with your book. It's time to implement. So you're saying that from your perspective, you've seen that people are getting dinged or not making the list because of that?
Yep, definitely. There's more campaigns than not right now that's happening too.
Interesting. So are those people not hitting the list at all? Are they
not hit? They'll hit maybe they'll hit Wall Street Journal, or they'll hit USA Today, or some of the other lists, but New York Times, which is one that is more subjective, but also the Holy Grail, they're just not hitting it all. I mean, there's guys that have moved. I can't say specifically who, but guys that I know, their sales that have moved 15, 20,000 units in a week and just nothing.
Yeah. What crazy. On that?
So that's where I tell people, you got to also check your motives, too. New York Times is awesome, but it's not. If I asked you right now, you're in publishing, hey, Chandler, tell me who were the top 10 bestsellers last week on New York Times, you'd have no idea. It's great. It's a great marketing tool, and you or I would use it, as an authority factor on our name. But it's just one of those things too that you can establish authority in different ways. If you hit it, it's great. But I just caution authors all the time, especially putting so much effort into just that one thing, just to be careful and make sure you're looking, further out instead of just for 1 week.
Yeah. Now, one more question on this New York Times thing. Well, why do you think it's just they're red flagging, or they're red flagging and you don't make the list, or that they're somehow messing with the algorithm?
No, they're just red flagging, losing it. Because there's a lot of stuff on the back end that you can check to make sure all your sales reported correctly, book scan, other industry things that show point of sale stuff that the publisher has. So you can verify that, that sales are legit and that they actually process the way that they needed to process, and books still don't hit. But then, like I said, I had one, which is crazy. I had one last November, Where a Man Stands was the name of the title. And it didn't hit the first week when it should have, because it sold 9,000 units. And then the second week, it only sold 1,000 and it hit. It's crazy. I don't know.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
Let's talk about some of these other short tail. So you were talking about 50-50. So we got 50% pre-launch, 50% launch week. What kind of things are you doing for pre-launch to drive sales? If we just establish, this free plus shipping, which a lot of people listening to this, it's probably not an option anyway, because this might be their first book and they don't have a huge platform.
Yep.
But if we can't do that, whether it's because we don't have a platform or because we'll get New York Times bestseller banned, what are some of the things that you do that do move books up front in that pre-sale period?
We'll take it from the perspective of somebody that's got maybe a small platform, or something like that. And this is really the same regardless of what size the platform is. The size of the platform just helps the ability to amplify it. So what I do in most cases is we're assessing the platform. We're building a backdated time frame. So if the book is coming out, in November, we want to be marketing proactively at least a month, 2 months prior to. You can never really market necessarily too soon. You don't want to go a year out, because then people are just fatigued. But I start with, what kind of offers can we do? What kind of incentive offers can we do to convert the list that you might already currently have and help use that to grow the list even more? And that can be a variety of things. It can be, giveaways, free course access, can be, action plans, white paper downloads, anything that could be perceived that is of value to your audience, that they would be willing to fork down a pre-order investment, and wait for the book to come out in exchange for getting that. And then do bulk offers too, so if somebody's, and don't be afraid to set a high premium. So, if Chandler was coming out with self-publishing school and wanted to make it where, hey, I'm just going to use this as a marketing tool to sell my book, you got to buy $100, worth of books in order to get access to the course. People underestimate how many people will take advantage of opportunities like that. I find a lot of new authors or green authors, if you want to call it that, they devalue themselves way too much. And they don't think people are going to pay for something. And, probably the first time you launched a course and you saw that first, sale come through, you're like, yeah. And that's the same thing, that it always surprises people how well it's going to do. But then another thing I do with almost every book that I do, regardless of the size of the platform, is a launch team. And I'm actually working on a product on that right now. But launch teams are huge because it is typically made up of people who are already following you. And this is where platform size, if you can get 50 people, great. And, if you're new, you can get 50 people. I mean, call your mom. I don't know.
Yeah.
I try to go anywhere between 100 and 500 people. And typically they're going to receive an advanced copy of the book one way or the other, digitally or by mail, so that they can review it. They get them into a private Facebook group. You're basically engaging with them all throughout the process. You're asking for ideas. You're getting them to help promote the book at times that you're asking to. I just had one recently, and her launch team was 400 or so. And we just asked them when they started, hey, guys, just send this author a tweet and just say how excited you are to be a part of her launch team. Her Twitter stream blew up. I mean, she's like texting me like, oh my gosh, I've never had this many tweets in my life. And it's just the power of consolidation and having a little army, that's willing to do something for you. So you take it from like an insiders club, and people, because most of us want to see somebody succeed. I want to root for you. And especially if you're a newer author, you're kind of the underdog. So if I can get behind you and help that message spread, it's going to happen. So offers, launch team, and then building out a strategic promotional plan. And that's where the hustle comes in. That's where I might be Daniel Decker, who nobody knows, but that doesn't stop me from calling or emailing Pat Flynn and saying, but not, there's the trick, like we talked about. Not, hey, Pat Flynn, will you help me promote my book? It's, Pat Flynn, I have something of value to your audience that I think is going to help them, and here's what it is. And if it relates to your book, great. It doesn't even have to always relate to your book, because you can bridge that gap later on. Pat gets on there and talks about how you launched a course and da-da-da-da. And by the way, I'm launching a new book, and people might want to check it out. It's about dog walking. I don't know.
Yeah. I love that. And love that we're hopping back to that, and it's adding value no matter what that value is, even if it doesn't have to do with your book. Like, it's adding value, building the relationship, and that can turn into something later, but not coming with the expectation, one, that it's going to turn into something, and also not coming just banging them over the head, just buy my book, promote my book.
A big point there, like you just said, is that you don't approach with the anticipation of getting either. I mean, it'd be great. And we all, regardless of what we say, all of us kind of, of course we want something at some point, but you can't, if you gave to Pat, like when I worked with Michael, if Michael would have never used me for something, that would have been fine, because I really genuinely wanted to help Michael. I loved Michael's content. He was adding value to me. And if I could help him, that was a win. I felt like, I achieved something. Yeah.
Now I want to dig into the launch thing a little bit, because we've done launch teams for some of our books, but we usually cap it at 100 because I wanted to keep it like more intimate, whatever. So what's the psychology? But you said 100 to 500. What's the psychology behind that? And then how do you manage such a large group?
I've had as many as 1,000. When we did Ryan Blair's book, Nothing to Lose, Everything to Gain, which hit #1 New York Times, we had 1,000 people on his team. It was crazy. I don't normally do them that big because of that reason right there. You kind of lose a little bit of the ability to interact. But there's a scale that I use. I mean, normally, whatever the launch team size is, about 60-70% are actually going to do something. And that's a pretty high number. So if you have a Facebook group that you're inviting them into, normally only about 50% are actually they might get in there, but not, I mean, initially they'll all be gangbusters and then they'll kind of die off a little bit. So you got to keep them engaged via email. But for me, and this is where a lot of authors kind of, and even publishers, I've had publishers fight me on it initially and then come around to drink the Kool-Aid. It's counterintuitive, so why would I want to give, I mean, if I only have 1,000 people on my email list, why would I want to give 200 of them a free copy of my book when they could buy it? Aren't I shooting myself in the foot from sales? No, because for an author, you want people to champion your content. So the more that they can, if they read it, now if your book sucks, you're just creating a slow death or a faster death. If your book's decent and people can get behind it, you want them to read it, you want them to embrace it so they can become ambassadors for the book. And what I do is, typically in the launch team cycle, we'll ask them, once they're kind of vested and they're like, hey, rah, at some point, guys, look, you're a part of the group, but every sale counts. So if you want to help support, and buy a copy or two for a friend, almost every team that I nurture, it's not necessarily the same for a lot of others because I just take a real personal approach to it. Creates a net gain of book sales from the number, so if the team is 300, we're going to sell typically 500 units at least just directly from them buying, not even to consider, the influx.
How do you track that?
It's really just from a timing standpoint, because I know that we have nothing else going at certain times. And then it's a lot of times the launch team will use Amazon affiliate links so we can tell a little bit. Sometimes if the sale, like the author is running a store through their shopping cart, we'll track it that way. So, I mean, it's kind of like, it's a little bit of historical data averaged out.
Got it. And you said that 60-70% of people will actually do something, but then you also mentioned how you have a Facebook group and then also email. Are you managing them through the Facebook group and also sending email reminders, or how is that working?
Yeah, it's the Facebook for the regular interaction, and then probably once a week, because we don't want to burn people out. Maybe I'm a believer of communicate when something needs to be communicated, not just for the sake of communication. So when there's something to update the team or an ask or a win, then we send anything that's important goes by email in addition to what is posted in the Facebook group.
Makes sense. Yeah. And is that tough to manage, or when you get up to 100, 500 people, what's that like?
It's not normally, because normally for me, the author is a part of it too. So it's kind of a dual deal. And I have an assistant, that's in there watching and making sure that, there's nothing like if all of a sudden 2 weeks later, people are like, hey, I haven't received my free copy yet or whatever, then we know something's up, and she's monitoring all that. But it's really not. I mean, it's kind of, you want to stay engaged, but the problem that most authors that I see that do any sort of advanced team, they don't make it relational. They make it about, you guys are promoting my book. Promote this. Here's a link. Promote this. And they just wear them out. It's like, you got to remember that people are people and they only have so many Facebook friends and followers. So use your inventory wisely. Don't ask them to promote everything, every blog post that you post, before your book launch. Use them strategically and engage with them. What are you guys up to? Tell me something about you that others don't know, or let's have a teleseminar one night and just kick it, and talk about ideas around the book. And you guys share. I had a Mark Sanborn, who's one of my authors, leadership guy. One of our launch team members had an idea for us to come up with a business card leave behind, because his book was The Fred Factor, about it's kind of customer service and whatnot. But it was about how to be the card. His idea was come up with a card that says you are extraordinary. So on one side, it's you are extraordinary. On the back, it's a little bit of copy, how you're awesome. Thank you for, serving me well. And it's got a link back to the book. His idea was get a bunch of those printed up, give them to people. So when you're at a restaurant, and your server does well to you, or you're in a cab or whatever, just leave one, thanks, man. Kind of surprise them with your tip. silly, small idea. We printed up 10,000 of them, gave them out to the launch team, started getting reports of people hearing, picking up a card in like New York and wherever. And it all of a sudden snowballed, and Mark started getting phone calls from clients saying, hey, can I buy like a box of those cards to give to my staff? Long story short, it snowballed into a pretty substantial idea because it wasn't using digital sharing. It was, it's tangible and it was different. But that came from an idea from a launch team member. So the point is, you engage them, you treat them like people, you talk to them, you build relationships with them, you serve them in ways that you can, and then use your requests strategically so that when you're asking them to promote or do something, it's when it's really going to count.
And what are some of the strategic requests that you make to that launch team?
It just, everything depends on, the book and what promotions are going. Crystal Payne, moneysavingmom.com. She's got like over, 1 million unique visitors a month. When we did hers, she had like a different big promotion every week leading up to her launch, where it was like, because her site's kind of, geared towards moms and like couponing and stuff. So it was like one week she was giving away a washer and dryer set, so it was like, we knew with that one very strategically, guys, help us promote each offer per week. I'm going to give you, some share copy. Like we'll create a share page where it's got sample Twitter links, sample whatever's one click you can share. I'm only going to ask you to share once though. If you choose to share a bunch of times, totally cool. If you can share at least once, that's awesome. So you're just not, you're treating people not like mercenaries. You're asking them to do the smart things. And then for books that don't have that type of, an offer a week, it's when is it most strategic to really get the launch team to push it hard, to get all their followers to try to buy this book, and what's your offer? So that's where the planning comes in.
Got it. And what would you say are like the top 2 or 3 things that you ask the launch team to do throughout the process?
Yeah, for a book specifically, we ask them to read it, get their thoughts back to us, because that's crowdsourcing. You can immediately tell, we'll ask people to share some of their primary quotes or things that stood out to them from the book. So you can kind of develop a theme, okay, so when you're developing any of your social media shareables or anything like that, you can kind of take away stuff from the book to know, or the product. This isn't limited, to a book. You'll know what were the triggers, because often the things that we think are going to be the trigger points aren't. It's often very surprising. I mean, sometimes you knew that, I knew that was going to be a zinger. But then, it's either confirms it for you, or they give you some other things that you're like, oh, sweet, I didn't know. So that's a big one. And then the getting them to leave reviews on Amazon. I mean, there's a lot of people offering, programs and courses, how to get 200 reviews on your book as soon as it launches. The great way to do it is a launch team. The thing you have to keep in mind when doing that is, if they don't buy a copy of their own, they're technically supposed to mention in their review that they got a free copy. But if they bought one, so you want to ask them to buy their copy before you're asking them to do their review. Got it.
So that's when you're asking them to buy a copy for a friend or family member, kind of like you were talking earlier.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just make that typically, it's real, because when you've built a relationship, when you and I are friends and you're a supporter of my book, you're willing to go buy 2 or 3 copies just to support me. Now you've got to feel that the book's worthy to give to a friend, but you might not even care. You might just buy 3 or 4 copies just to give away or throw away. And that's really what it is. I mean, if you cultivate relationships with people in your launch team and you take them on the journey with you, 3-4 weeks later, as you're building into the launch, they're endeared to you. They care about you, and they more than they did before. And they feel like you care about them, so they're going to do stuff.
Any other tips on the launch team? Cause I'm loving digging into this stuff. Any other like random things that you've done that you've seen work well on launch teams?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I'm trying to think of how many launch teams that I've done over the years. It's a lot of them. That's really, the big differentiator on them. Because if you go to a publisher, a traditional publisher, many of them, you say, hey, I want to do a launch team. they're like, oh, those don't work. They're stupid. And why for them that they don't work is it because they have a junior level person from their staff administering the Facebook group or administering the group who doesn't interact with them. They just treat them like a transactional, hey, dog, jump, do this. And it doesn't work when you do that because people don't care. That's really, it's simple, but it's so huge that relationships, there's all kinds of other tactics with regard to, how can you leverage the launch team into course stuff or reviews or doing video testimonials or we had an Instagram campaign one time that got kicked off by you use the launch team strategically to be your seed, so if you're doing a contest or, an Instagram deal, ask them to help with that. So you immediately get 200 or 300 people that are, hashtagged it, and you build off of that. Take a screenshot. Oh my gosh, I can't believe how many people are, engaged in this campaign already. And then it's the nothing attracts a crowd like a crowd, because then everybody else is like, wow, Chandler's the man. Look at him, 300 tweets right out the box.
That's cool. What was the Instagram campaign that got kicked off? What's the story there?
We've done several. one that comes to mind, and this is kind of a little different. Ryan Blair, after we launched his book, we also did his documentary, Nothing to Lose, Everything to Gain. It's nothingtolose.com. And on that one, we had hashtag NTLDOC, and that's been probably, a year and a half ago. So that hashtag's kind of floated away now. But we partnered up with a nonprofit so that whenever someone came in, like every view, he gave $1 to a charity. And his son has, oh gosh, what is it? Just went right out of my head. But he basically donated $1, to the charity of choice every time somebody would come in and watch the video. So we got the launch team involved in it in the beginning and had them kind of seed everything, go out and, put some pictures and go watch and take pictures of yourself watching it, and all that. And it basically just seeded it. So when we started to roll it out to everybody else, it appeared already bigger than what it was, which made people more interested. It's just like when you're running a Facebook ad. Well, if your Facebook ad has 50 comments on it, when that, post is turned into an ad and it's coming through the stream, I'm going to say, wait a minute. Oh, wait, people are engaged in that. That must be legit. If I see no activity on it, whatever.
Yeah, that's totally true. I find myself doing that as well. It's like, what? This is cool. You're scrolling. Oh, that's cool. Oh, wait, it's an ad. Oh, wait, there's a ton of likes and comments. I want to click in and see what these people are saying in these comments.
I'm not going to lie. Even with your stuff, like when I found out about you, because I'm a consummate learner. I don't, you can learn from anybody. And I think that's the other thing too, is that people have to always be willing to forget what you think because you might be right, but you can always learn something from somebody else who's doing it a little differently and pick up some nuggets. But I'm looking at, your Facebook ads, and that was one of the things that I did notice, that you had a lot of engagement in your stuff. And it was like, wow, there's this guy, I don't even think he has a blog. What's he doing? He's like coming out of nowhere. And that's intriguing, too, but you immediately had authority because it was like, and then you go over to your video pages and there's like 1,000 comments, on your landing pages and stuff like that on the Facebook comments. So it's smart. You're doing the right thing. And that's where a lot of people can use a launch team, to help them do some of that. So if you're launching a product and you need, people to put comments on your landing page, ask your team to go do it, and they will.
Awesome. Now, I know we dug into that launch team thing for a while, and that was awesome. I want to circle back. We've already went a little bit long, but this is just good. So we're gonna keep rolling. But I want to circle back because we got an open loop here. We were talking about short-term, short tail strategies. Let's get to some long tail because that's one thing we opened up a lot earlier. And so you've got Jon. I want to keep selling a ton of books end over end. What are some more long tail stuff that you guys are doing for those book launches?
Yeah, and that's where, it gets into a lot of choice, because what happens with most authors as they begin to make it, they start to, so if you're going to be a speaker, and you go and you're speaking at an event and you're going to sell back of room product. You're going to try to negotiate a deal with your publisher and get the books cheap so that you can sell them, or you're going to, if you're self-published, you're selling them there as well. It's just that gets into the choice of, what do you want to be? What do you want to do? For Jon, we chose for him that he wants all his sales residually to count towards reporting booksellers. So when Jon goes in and does a speaking engagement, we don't get books from the publisher and sell them directly, because those books won't count. They won't show on the book scan list. So we want all of his stuff right now, to be counting and showing. And that is just a strategic decision from our side for him. It doesn't mean it's wrong, or others are wrong for doing back of room sales or anything like that. But it's a lot of defining who you want to be, where you want to go. Are you looking at this? Are you trying to monetize your book? Are you trying to monetize your platform? Or in Jon's case, he just wants to speak. So he doesn't need to monetize a $10 book necessarily when he's getting paid $30,000 to come in and do a 40-minute keynote. And he doesn't get bogged down in the minutia of trying to do, is he leaving money on the table? Absolutely. But he doesn't care, because that's not his thing. And that's where a lot of authors try to do too much, and they end up spreading themselves way too thin, and not really concentrating on that core thing of who they want to be.
And so when he does these book sales, does it just? So are you saying he just doesn't sell back of room?
He does, but through a retailer. So instead of bringing in his own books and having his own sales rep. So it might be that we bring in Barnes and Noble, to be there, and they'll sell the books, and so the books are being sold. It's just going through a retailer and not through his own staff or anything like that.
Got it. Okay. That's where I was confused. So you bring in like a Barnes and Noble. Is it always a bookstore, and then they handle all the inventory, they handle all the sales?
Sometimes it's just the client buying them direct, but we deter the client from going to the publisher and trying to or going to a discount thing. We encourage them as part of the deal, to go through Barnes and Noble or to go through Givington or 800 CEO Read or some other retailer that is a reporting retailer, someone that when that transaction happens, they're reporting the units to BookScan. Because if your books don't, there's a lot of, especially in the business space, there's a lot of authors who, if you looked at their BookScan numbers, they've only sold a couple of thousand. But the reality is their total units overall sold could be millions, but they're not tracked by BookScan. So, and part of the reason on this is this. So Chandler goes and decides, hey, I think I want to go and get a publishing deal with Random House. First thing Random House does, if you're a already published author, first thing that acquisitions editor is going to do is BookScan. How many units has he sold? And then Chandler says, oh, but wait, no. You see, I'm a speaker and I've sold all these other books back of room. And they're like, yeah, whatever. So it diminishes for Jon. So now we can go in, to any publisher. I mean, he's with Wiley and stays with them because they're great. But he, if he wanted to, he could go to another publisher and they're going to pop it up. Oh, wow, you've sold legitimately through retail channels 2 million units. Okay, 7-figure advance, that kind of deal.
Yeah. So since he's with the publisher and has stuck with that publisher, and also he doesn't care about New York Times bestseller, why keep doing that book scan? Is it for a future book? What are the other reasons that he would keep doing that through book scan reporting channels? Yeah,
and that's where it gets to be, just choice, because for people who are monetizing their platform, who don't, aren't getting $30,000 a speech. Like if you were a new author coming to me and saying, Daniel, what should I do? I really don't have much of a platform. I really don't do, have much of this. I would say self-publish because it's faster, you have more margin, you have more control, you have the ability, but you got to do it right. You want to do it legit. You don't want to have, a cover that looks like it was from 1922. And you got to have an editor and all that stuff. But you have the ability to have more control, and you build, and you've got your residual product. You've got, the online ability to sell it. You've got the ability to track with metrics to know what's working and what's not working. When you get to a certain point, though, like a Michael Hyatt has the infrastructure, if he wanted to self-publish all of his books. But at some point it's a choice for him. He doesn't want to deal with having to do his own editing and do his own cover work and his own whatever. He wants to write the book and have the publisher handle all the distribution aspects and all the other, potential headaches of it. So that's where, it just gets into the choice of where someone wants to go. What do they want to do? Is their platform at a point where they want to monetize it in a different way? That just really kind of leads the direction. It's not a right or wrong, it's just really gets to be a choice.
Got it. And when you go towards a book scan reporting platform, does book scan reporting platform equal less money per book, like across the board?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, the typical author relationship with a publisher is that, you're going to sign your deal. They're going to give you an advance. And an advance is really just a loan against your sales, so people get confused by that. It's like, oh, so-and-so got a 6-figure advance. Well, okay, well, they're not going to earn out anything for, 2 years if they ever do. So you get that. And then you're making royalties based off of books you'll make royalties off of books that are sold directly from the publisher, like through your author discount, but it's tiny. Really, really, you get like 20 cents a book. But if your regular royalty is coming through your regular sale through a book scan reporting entity, I mean, depending on the price of the book and your deal, I mean, you might make $2, $3 a book.
Yeah, that's like the same deal with my brother. We were talking about that before the interview.
Yep.
Need to Breathe. It's same deal
Publishing
with
deals.
records.
Yep.
Yeah, publishing deals and record deals. There's a lot of similarities there.
Yeah, and it's so different now because like when John and I started 14 years ago, the publisher had a different role. I mean, you almost had to have a publisher in order to get access. Now you don't. I mean, a self-published author has almost as much of a chance, or more chance of success than others because you've got more control and you have the ability to go direct to consumer and all that. But it just really gets to be, part of the choice, part of the, what do you want? Like for me, I've got a couple of book ideas and one that I'll probably come out with my first book through a traditional publisher because I know I can get a big advance because they know what I can move and platform wise. And the reason for that, honestly, it's really just capital, it's so that I can invest back into some other things and so that they can handle the distribution part. But I'll either come out with a self-published resource guide or an accompaniment or something to go alongside it that I can make full margin on and leverage my launch. And then my next book probably would be self-published.
Got it. And why would you go self-published with the second book?
Just the margin, I mean, just like the author sells most of their books. I mean, anyways, so it's your hustle, it's your list, it's your whatever. You get big enough in the publisher, if people know Max Lucado or John, the big leadership guys, John Maxwell and all that, they've got a big enough platform and a big enough exposure that the publisher relationship does move more books for them. But the average author, if you sell a book, it's because you marketed it, and that'll be the same, it's as bookstores decrease, the opportunity increases, and it's just better margin. And I'm a hustler, I mean, I like knowing if I promoted, in Chandler's newsletter, and I had a affiliate link or a link back that I can tell how many that converted to. I'm a marketer. I'm a tester. I like digging in. I like playing with it, and you can do more of that with a self-published book.
Yeah, absolutely. That's 100% the truth. That's what mine just blows my mind when I talk to people who publish, and they're like, not only can I not see a ton of the numbers that are actually happening with my book, but the numbers I do see are like a quarter, either a month, a quarter, half a year, like so far down the road that it's like, if I change something now, I won't even be able to see that change for another quarter or 6 months. Like there's no adaptation and like incremental improvement that you get with self-publishing.
Well, and see, part of the problem is too, is it for the average author, for the guy who's going to sell, a couple thousand units maybe in a year, and probably for a lot of the ones who are watching this, you can go traditional and get an advance, but normally your advance, unless you've got some sort of platform, you might get 5,000, 10,000, something like that in advance. You're going to be stoked about that. You're going to think, oh my gosh, I just got 10 grand, for my book and it's going to actually come out. But the problem is The publisher's not going to put much marketing dollar behind it. You're going to have to do everything yourself, but you have no real way, unless you have a course or speaking, you have no way to fund it because you're not going to make money off of your book. I mean, if you do, by the time you get a royalty check, it'll be, a year and a half down the road, easy. And that's why I like the self-publishing side of things too, and having a dual strategy with it, so that, like Jon, he doesn't self-publish, and not to keep referencing him all the time, but we have DVD products or video on demand. We have every book that he comes out with, we come out with an action plan, so we can take the principles from the book and turn it into action. And really, it's so simple. They're 30-page PDF docs. They're not Kindle. They're not, whatever. They're you buy it and you download a PDF. We sell them for $10. We don't even really promote them outside of when the book launches as an accompaniment. And he does, right now we're doing about $6,000 a month in $10 downloads, not even pushing it. It's crazy.
Wow. That's awesome. Well, Daniel, I know we could go on and on and on about this, and really, we hit a sweet spot here, and we were just going, and I'd love to keep going. But I guess this is where we'll wrap, and I'll just wrap by asking one last question. That is, you were talking about self-publishing, and we just touched on some of the benefits there, and also the benefits of publishing. Like you said, it's a personal choice. And it depends on your goals. It depends on what you want to do. What would be like a final parting piece of advice? Because a lot of people listen to this, they're thinking about writing their first book. They're thinking about launching their first book. What would be your final piece of advice to someone in that position, but on the self-publishing side? Whether it's stuff you've done or just final recommendation.
Yeah. I think that they're already doing the right thing, because they're watching this, which means they're within the summit, and hopefully paying attention to the things that you're sharing and the experts or authorities that you're bringing into this. The problem with a lot of folks, is that they're listening to this stuff and either they get bogged down or confused, or they get overwhelmed and they just don't act. The biggest thing is come up with a plan. Come up with your publishing plan, whether it's to go traditional or self, and take action. You've got to put stuff in front of you to do it, because you'll look back in a year, I wish I would have, and it just, time creeps up on you. So that's the biggest thing, is making sure that you're taking action on the things that you're learning. And if you're self-publishing, utilize everything that's at your disposal. The people that talk about build your email list, the people that are talking about, all these things that you can do to capture your audience before you get up to the point of launching your book. It's critical. You've got to have a way to build an audience. And then, like you, Chandler, doesn't mean you necessarily have to be a blogger. It means you can come up with a product. It means you can come up with other ways to build a list and to build a base of people. And but you got to start. It doesn't mean one person plus one person equals two. It's how you build your list. When Jon Gordon and I started, 14 years ago, he had his mom, his brother, and a dude from Europe that was on his email list. And we're like, who was that guy? It's just it's over time, it's exponential growth. You compound it, you build it, and you keep going. And you just, if you believe it and it's a message you want to share, you don't give up.
That's great. And that's such a great place to wrap, ending with that message. Daniel, this has been great. Before we head off, where can people find out more information about you and about what you got going on?
Yeah, danieldecker.net is my site, and Twitter, Instagram. Twitter is Daniel Decker, at Daniel Decker. Those are probably the best right now.
Awesome. Daniel, thanks so much, man. This has been really good.
All right, man. Thank you.
Thank you so much for watching or listening to this episode of the Self-Publishing School podcast. I know there's so many places that you can be spending your time. There's other podcasts that you could be listening to, YouTube channels that you could be watching. So thank you so much. It means the world. Now, I want you to do 3 things right now if you found this episode helpful. All right, number 1, I don't know if you know this, but we've got a YouTube channel. It's a companion channel to this podcast. All the video versions of the episode are on the YouTube channel. So number 1, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Number 2, if you're listening to this podcast wherever, whether this is Spotify, Apple Podcasts, number 2, I want you to subscribe to this podcast right now so you don't miss a future episode. And then number 3, this is probably the most important, leave a review on the podcast. All right, reviews are super important and help the podcast get discovered by other people. So number 3, leave a review on the podcast. Thank you so much. I'll see you in the next episode. If you're on the fence about scheduling a publishing consultation call with my team, maybe you're not quite ready for that, I've got some free training that I think will be really helpful for you. All right, all you have to do is go to register to sign up. Go to selfpublishing.com/free training. When you do, you're also going to get a free digital copy of my new book, Published. And on that training, you're going to learn the next steps, so how to implement with your book. So how to write, how to publish, how to launch successfully. So go to register right now at selfpublishing.com/free training. I'll see you there.